The voice of an old man cuts through silence like wind through canyon stone. There are days that define a life, days when everything changes because of one choice, one moment, one decision to stop instead of riding past. I was 65 years old when I finally told this story, but I was 48 when I lived it. Back in 1876, when Arizona territory was still more dirt than law, and a man could disappear into the mountains for 11 years without anyone asking why. The voice carries weight, experience, the rough edges of a life lived hard and long. Her name was Ayita. She was hanging there like a hunted animal when I found her, and I had to decide right then, right there, whether I was the kind of man who could ride past suffering or the kind who'd stop. Even if stopping meant everything else would change, even if it meant war. Silence falls, then the sound of wind, the cry of a hawk, and the story begins. The Arizona sun was a living thing, not warm, not hot, murderous. It pressed down on Fort Prescott at exactly 112 degrees Fahrenheit at 11:37 in the morning. The kind of heat that made the air shimmer and dance. The kind that turned human skin to leather if you stayed in it long enough. Aida had been in it for 4 hours and 37 minutes. She hung from the A-frame wooden structure in the center of the fort's main yard. Her wrists were bound with rough hemp rope pulled wide to either side. Her ankles were tied the same way, spread just enough that her toes could barely touch the packed earth below. Just barely. Close enough to give hope, far enough to make it torture. Her dress was torn at the shoulder. Dust covered her bronze skin, mixing with sweat that no longer came. Her body had nothing left to give. The dehydration had stopped her tears 2 hours ago. Now there was just the slow, steady burn of sun on exposed flesh. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her face, once beautiful, was streaked with dirt and pain. But her eyes still held fire. A crowd had gathered. 20, maybe 30 people. Soldiers mostly, some townspeople. A few children who should not have been watching but were anyway, because cruelty has always drawn crowds. They milled about like it was a Sunday social, talking, laughing, pointing. One man stood apart from the others. On the second-floor balcony of the fort's headquarters, Colonel Harlan Voss watched the scene below with the cold attention of a man calculating odds. He was 54 years old, lean as a whip, with eyes the color of winter ice. His uniform was immaculate, every button polished, every crease sharp. He looked like what he had once been, a hero, a man who'd stood at Gettysburg and watched friends die by the hundreds and still held the line. But that was another life, another war, another version of himself. Now he just watched a 23-year-old Apache woman dying slowly in his courtyard and felt nothing but the mathematics of it. How long until she broke? How long until she gave up the information he needed? How long until the problem solved itself? Below, in the shade of a scraggly cottonwood tree that somehow survived in this hellscape, an old Apache man stood watching. His face was carved from oak in time. 67 years had put deep lines around his eyes, his mouth, his forehead. His name was Hastian, and he had seen many terrible things in his long life. But this cut deeper than most, because he knew the girl hanging there, knew her father, knew her people, and he knew she was innocent of the crimes they claimed. But he also knew that speaking up would mean death, not just for him, but for his grandson, for the others in the reservation who depended on the fragile peace between the Apache and the soldiers. So he stood and watched and prayed to the old gods that something, anything, would change. The wind picked up, a hot breath across the desert that brought no relief. It made the wooden frame creak under Aida's weight, made her body sway just slightly, pulling against the ropes that held her. She had long since stopped trying to scream. The sun had stolen her voice hours ago. Now she just hung there, drifting between consciousness and darkness, between life and whatever came after. And then came the sound of hooves. Slow, steady, the lazy rhythm of a horse that knew its way home and was in no hurry to get there. The sound came from the east, from the direction of the Superstition Mountains. One horse, one rider, moving through the heat shimmer like a ghost becoming solid. Hastian heard it first. He turned, squinting against the sun, his old eyes trying to make sense of the shape taking form in the distance. The rider crested the small rise 400 yards from the fort, stopped, sat there for a long moment, silhouetted against the white-hot sky. Then the rider moved forward again, slower now, more careful. Ayeda lifted her head with the last bit of strength she had left. Her eyes, half closed against the glare, tried to focus on the approaching figure. She thought perhaps she was hallucinating. Perhaps this was death coming for her in a shape she could understand. But the hoofbeats were real, getting closer. The crowd noticed. Their conversations faltered. Heads turned, soldiers shifted, hands moving unconsciously toward weapons. The rider came into clear view now. A big man on a bigger horse, maybe 6'2", broad shoulders, wearing buckskin and leather gone dark with age and use. A bearskin coat despite the heat, the fur thick and grizzled. Long hair, more gray than brown, tied back. A beard that covered half his face, wound and unkempt. But it was the eyes that caught you, even from a distance. Gray-blue, like winter ice over deep water. The eyes of a man who had seen too much and felt too little for too long. Tobias Marchant. Though most who remembered him at all called him Grizz. For the coat. For the way he moved through the mountains like the animal itself. For the fact that he'd killed a grizzly with nothing but a knife when he was 16 years old and wore its skin ever since. He was 48 years old. He had been living alone in the White Mountains for 11 years. And he had not planned on stopping at Fort Prescott today. But then he saw her. From 400 yards, his eyes found Ayeda hanging in the sun. And something inside him, something he thought had died with his wife and daughter 11 years ago, suddenly came back to life. It felt like lightning in his chest, like a fist closing around his heart. Not again. Not another woman dying while he watched. Not this time. Chapter 2. The choice. Tobias rode his horse right into the fort yard. Did not ask permission. Did not slow down. Just came straight in like he owned the place. Sergeant Colt Brenner stepped forward to intercept him. Brenner was 36 years old, built like a bull, with small, mean eyes and a smile that never reached them. His hand rested on the pistol at his hip. That's far enough, mountain man. This is a military installation. You need authorization to be here. Tobias did not look at him. His eyes stayed fixed on Ayeda, on the way her head hung forward, on the blood on her lips, on the fact that she was not moving anymore. She needs water, Tobias said. His voice was rough from disuse, deep, quiet, but it carried. Now, Brenner stepped closer. She's a thief, a criminal. Under military justice, this ain't your concern. I'm making it my concern. You got some authority I don't know about. Tobias finally looked at Brenner, really looked at him. And Brenner, for all his bluster, took half a step back, because there was something in that steady gaze, something that spoke of lines crossed and prices paid. The look of a man who understood at exactly what violence cost and was willing to pay it again, if necessary. Authority of a man with eyes, Tobias said quietly. Who can see wrong when it's staring him in the face? The crowd had gone silent now, everyone watching, the air thick with tension and heat. From the balcony, Colonel Voss observed this development with interest. He knew Tobias Marchant, or rather he knew of him, the legendary scout who'd served in the Indian Wars from 1858 to 1866, the man who could track anything on 2 legs or 4, who'd saved 3 different cavalry units from ambush, who'd been offered a commission and turned it down because he didn't want to lead men anymore, didn't want to be responsible for more death, and then his wife and daughter died of fever, and he disappeared into the mountains. And most people assumed he'd died up there, or gone mad, or both. But here he was, still alive, still apparently capable of causing trouble. Voss leaned on the railing. Mr. Marchant, it's been a long time. Tobias looked up, studied Voss for a moment. Colonel, I heard you'd taken to the hermit life, living like a wild man up in the high country. Living quiet, living alone, bothering nobody. Until today, Voss said. There was no anger in his voice, just observation. Today, you're bothering quite a few people. Today, I saw something that needed addressing. That woman stole from me, from this fort, from the United States Army. Justice is being served. This ain't justice, Tobias said. His voice stayed level, calm, but underneath it was something hard as stone. This is cruelty dressed up in uniform. Murmurs from the crowd. Brenner's hand tightened on his pistol grip. Voss smiled. It was not a warm smile. Strong words. What would you have me do? Let a thief go unpunished? Put her in a cell, give her a trial, let a judge decide, but get her down from there before she dies. And if I refuse? Tobias sat very still in his saddle. Around him, 5 soldiers had moved into position, rifles ready. He was one man, unarmed except for the big knife at his belt and whatever might be in his saddlebags, against 24 soldiers, against a fort full of armed men. The mathematics were not in his favor, but mathematics had never been what drove Tobias Marchant. Then I'll remember you as the man who tortured women for entertainment, Tobias said quietly, and I'll make sure everyone else remembers too. The silence stretched. Voss and Tobias locked eyes across the distance. 2 men who'd both seen war, who'd both killed, who both knew exactly what the other was capable of. And then a third voice cut through the tension. Tobias Marchant, is that really you? Everyone turned. From the shadows near the cottonwood tree, Hastings stepped forward, moving slowly, carefully. An old man approaching soldiers who could kill him without consequence if they chose. But he kept coming anyway. Tobias's eyes widened slightly, recognition dawning. Hastings? The old Apache man nodded, kept walking until he stood 10 feet from Tobias's horse. Then he spoke in Apache, the words flowing like water over stone. 22 winters have passed since you saved my son from the bear. Tobias replied in the same language, his accent rough but understandable. I remember. Is he well? He has 3 children now, because you did not ride past his suffering. Hastings switched back to English, his gaze moving to include Voss and the others. This man has honor. When my people called him friend, it meant something. If he says this is wrong, perhaps we should listen. Brenner started to object. Voss silenced him with a raised hand. The colonel studied the situation. Tobias Marchant, legendary scout, making a scene. Hastings, respected elder, vouching for him. A crowd watching, whispers spreading. This was not the quiet disposal he'd planned. Voss made his calculation. Sometimes you lose a battle to win a war. Very well, he said smoothly. Sergeant Brenner, cut her down. Take her to the holding cells. We'll have a proper military tribunal tomorrow morning. Relief flickered across Tobias's face. Brief, quickly hidden. But Hastings caught it, and in that moment the old Apache knew 2 things with certainty. First, that Tobias Marchant had just made an enemy in Colonel Voss. And second, that the girl hanging in the sun was about to become the center of something much larger than anyone yet understood. Brenner and another soldier approached the frame, cut the ropes with rough efficiency. Aida collapsed like a marionette with severed strings, would have hit the ground hard if Tobias hadn't moved. He was off his horse in a heartbeat, caught her halfway down. Her weight slammed into his chest, dead weight, her body limp and burning with fever. She gasped, a terrible sound, air tearing into lungs that had forgotten how to breathe properly. Her eyes opened, wild and unfocused. She tried to speak, but nothing came out except a dry rasp. Easy, Tobias murmured. Easy now, you're down, you're alive. Her eyes found his face. For a moment there was nothing there but animal terror. Then something shifted, some small spark of recognition that this man, this stranger with the gray beard and the gentle hands, was not her enemy. She fainted against him. Tobias lifted her without apparent effort, cradled her like she weighed nothing at all, turned toward the fort's cell block. Brenner blocked his path. I'll take her from here. No, Tobias said simply. That's an order, mountain man. Tobias looked at him. Just looked. And Brenner, who'd killed men in bar fights and border skirmishes and never lost a moment's sleep, found himself stepping aside. Voss watched from the balcony as Tobias carried the unconscious Apache woman into the cell block. Watched Hastings follow. Watched the crowd disperse, buzzing with gossip and speculation. He turned to the aide standing behind him. Find out everything we can about what Marchant's been doing for the last 11 years. And send word to Captain Whitmore at Fort Apache. Tell him we may have a situation developing. The aide saluted and left. Voss stayed on the balcony, staring at the empty wooden frame in the center of the yard. The ropes hung loose now, swaying slightly in the hot wind. He'd meant for the girl to die out there, slowly, publicly, a warning to anyone else who might think about stealing from him. about discovering his secrets, about threatening everything he'd built. But Tobias Marchant had interfered. And Voss was not a man who tolerated interference well. Tomorrow morning, he decided, before dawn, before Marchant could cause more trouble, the girl would have an accident, fall in her cell, break her neck. These things happened. And if the mountain man objected, well, accidents could happen to anyone. Chapter 3. Night in the cell. The cell block was cooler than outside, not by much, but enough that Ayita's fever might not kill her in the next hour. Tobias laid her on the wooden bench that served as a bed. There was no mattress, no blanket, just hard wood worn smooth by countless prisoners before her. He pulled off his bearskin coat, folded it, put it under her head. A young soldier stood guard at the cell door. Couldn't have been more than 21. Fresh-faced, uncomfortable. His name was Private Owen Murphy, and he'd signed up for the army to see the world and found himself instead watching a dying Apache woman in an Arizona prison cell. "She needs water," Tobias said. Not asking, stating. Murphy hesitated. "I'm not supposed to. She's dying of thirst in your custody. That'll look real good in the official report." Murphy swallowed, nodded, disappeared, and came back 5 minutes later with a canteen and a tin cup, handed them through the bars. Tobias poured water into the cup, lifted Aida's head gently, touched the cup to her cracked lips. "Small sips," he murmured. "Don't drink too fast." She was semi-conscious now, aware enough to drink. Her throat worked painfully, swallowing the water like it was salvation itself. Which it was. After 3 small sips, Tobias pulled the cup away. "More in a minute. Let your body adjust." Her eyes opened, focused on him with effort. She tried to speak, but her voice was gone. "Don't talk," Tobias said. "Just rest." But she kept staring at him, and in her eyes was a question, a confusion. Why? Why would a white man help her? Why would anyone? Haston entered the cell block. Murphy started to stop him, then thought better of it. The old Apache approached the cell, knelt down outside the bars. He spoke in Apache. "Child of Nintaje, can you hear me?" Aida's eyes shifted to him. Recognition. She nodded slightly. "This man who carries you," Haston continued in Apache. "His name is Tobias. He is known to my people. He walked with honor in the old days. He saved my son when the bear would have killed him. He married an Arapaho woman. Lived as one of us for a time. He understands our ways." Aida's gaze moved back to Tobias. Some of the fear left her eyes. Not all, but some. Tobias gave her more water. Small sips. Patient. His big rough hands surprisingly gentle. Murphy watched from near the door. He'd never seen anyone treat an Apache prisoner like this. Like a person. Like someone who mattered. "I'm staying," Tobias announced. "Until morning. Until the tribunal." "I can't authorize that," Murphy said. "Then go get someone who can." Murphy looked between Tobias and the dying woman and the old Apache man. Looked at the situation he'd somehow found himself in the middle of. Made a decision. "I'll ask the sergeant," he said, which meant he wouldn't, which meant he was choosing to look the other way. 20 minutes later, Brenner arrived. Looked at the scene. Tobias sitting on the floor outside the cell. Hasty in beside him. Aida drinking water in tiny sips. "You're still here?" "I am. Colonel said you could stay till morning. Make sure she's well enough for the tribunal." Brenner's smile was ugly. "Wouldn't want her dying before we get to hear her confession." He left, his boots echoing on the stone floor. Murphy relaxed slightly. "I'll be right outside if you need anything." "Coffee," Tobias said, "if you got any." "I can probably find some." Murphy left. The cell block fell quiet except for the sound of Ayita's breathing. Steadier now, stronger, Hastion spoke softly. "She saw something Colonel Voss once buried." "What?" "I do not know, but 3 weeks ago an inspector came from Washington. Federal man, asking questions about weapons, about supplies, about money." Hastings' old eyes were dark with knowledge. He met with Voss, and the next day, the inspector was gone. They said he left on the morning stage, but I saw no stage. And now this girl hangs for theft. But what she stole, they will not say. Tobias absorbed this, turned it over in his mind. You think she witnessed something? I think she knows why the inspector disappeared, and I think Voss would rather see her dead than talking. They sat in silence for a while. Aida had fallen into real sleep now, not the delirium of heat exhaustion. Actual rest, her breathing deep and even. Tell me about her, Tobias said quietly. Hastian closed his eyes, remembering. Her father was Chief Nantashe, good man, strong, fair. He led our people well in difficult times. 5 years ago, the soldiers attacked our village. Said we'd been raiding. We had not. We were peaceful. But they came anyway. His voice was steady, factual, but underneath it was an ocean of grief. Nantashe tried to negotiate, tried to stop the violence. Sergeant Brenner shot him from behind, in the back, while he held up his hands for peace. Tobias closed his eyes. Ayita saw this. She was 18, screamed and ran to her father. Brenner would have killed her too, but his commanding officer stopped him. Said enough blood for one day. Her mother? Died 3 months later. Some say from sickness. I say from a broken heart. When the spirit does not want to live, the body follows. So she's been alone 5 years. She has a younger brother, Kitchi, 13 winters. He lives in the reservation. She worked here as translator to earn money for his food, for his future. Hastin opened his eyes, and now she will die because she saw something she should not have seen. Murphy returned with coffee. Strong and black, Tobias drank it slowly, letting the heat cut through the exhaustion settling into his bones. Tomorrow morning, Hastian said quietly, there will be no tribunal. Voss will not risk her speaking publicly. Then we leave before tomorrow morning. And that is treason against the United States Army. That's saving an innocent woman from murder. Hastian smiled slightly. You always did see things simply, black or white, right or wrong. Some things are simple, and some things get you killed. Tobias shrugged. Been living alone 11 years. Sometimes dying seems easier than remembering. They sat together in the growing darkness. Murphy lit a lantern. The golden light played across the cell bars, creating patterns of shadow and illumination. Around midnight, Aida woke, her eyes clearer now. She tried to sit up, managed it on the second attempt. Tobias handed her more water through the bars. She drank it down, then looked at him directly for the first time. When she spoke, her voice was rough as gravel, but understandable. One word, but it contained multitudes. Tobias thought about how to answer, thought about Silver Dove dying of fever while he was 5 days away hunting, about Emma, his daughter, 7 years old, asking for him with her last breath, about 11 years of guilt and isolation and trying to forget what it felt like to care about anyone. Because someone should, he said finally, because it's right, and because I couldn't save the last woman I watched die. Maybe I can save you. Aida studied his face. The gray beard, the lines around his eyes, the sorrow carved deep into every feature. She saw a man carrying his own ghosts, his own failures. I stole, she said quietly, from Colonel Voss, from his safe, so they are not wrong about that. Tobias nodded, waited. But what I stole was not money. What then? Aida looked at Hastian. The old man nodded. Permission. 3 weeks ago, she began, her voice getting stronger as she talked. I was working late, translating documents about reservation boundaries. Colonel Voss thought I had gone home, but I was still there, in the back office. She paused, drank more water, continued. I heard voices, loud, angry, coming from the colonel's private room. 2 men, one was Voss, the other I did not know. They were arguing about weapons, about money, about something called a ledger. Her hands trembled slightly, remembering. Then I heard a gunshot. Just one, then another, then silence. Tobias leaned forward. You saw? I saw through the door crack. A man lying on the floor. Blood, so much blood, and Colonel Voss standing over him with a pistol. Sergeant Brenner came in. They wrapped the body in canvas, put it in a wagon, drove away. Where? I do not know, but I heard Brenner say something about Devil's Throat Canyon, about twisted juniper trees. Haston hissed softly. That is bad land, 20 miles west. No one goes there. Aida continued. After they left, I was so frightened. I thought about running, but I knew what I had seen, knew what it meant. If I ran, I would always be running. So you decided to take proof, Tobias said. I found the safe. I had seen the colonel open it before. I knew the combination. Inside was money and a leather book, a ledger with names and numbers and dates, guns, hundreds of guns, sold to Apache raiders, sold to land speculators, sold to Mexican traders, all signed by Colonel Voss. Where's the ledger now? Aida's eyes flicked to Hastian, then back to Tobias. Hidden, safe. Only two people know where. Your brother? She nodded. Tobias sat back, processed all of it. A federal inspector asking questions about weapons, an inspector who disappeared, a girl who witnessed murder and stole evidence, a colonel who needed all witnesses dead before the truth came out. The calculation was simple. They're going to kill you, he said flatly. Tonight, tomorrow, soon, before you can talk to anyone who matters. I know. So we leave. Now, while it's still dark. Murphy had been listening from his post near the door. Now he spoke up. I can't let you do that. I'll be court-martialed. Tobias turned to look at him, really look at him. How old are you, son? 21. You believe in right and wrong? Yes, sir. Then choose. Tobias's voice was gentle. Not threatening, just stating facts. You can follow orders and watch an innocent woman die. Or you can look the other way for 10 minutes and maybe live with yourself afterward. Murphy's hands shook slightly. If I help you, my career is over. If you don't help, a girl dies. Which matters more? Murphy's jaw worked. His hands trembled. Finally, words spilled out in a rush. There's something you should know. This ain't Voss's first time. He glanced at the door nervously. 6 months back, Apache man, prisoner. Said he witnessed something, found, hung in his cell. Suicide, they said. Tobias went very still. But I was on watch that night. Heard struggling. Heard more than one voice. When I checked, he was already dead. Sergeant Brenner was walking out. Told me to mind my own business if I valued my stripes. The words hung in the air like smoke. Voss hadn't just killed Inspector Mallory. He'd been eliminating witnesses for months, maybe years. This was systematic, calculated, a pattern of murder hidden behind military authority. Aida's eyes went wide with understanding. How many? Murphy shook his head. I don't know, but I've seen 3 suspicious deaths in 8 months. All prisoners, all Apache, all died alone in their cells. The silence that followed was heavy. Tobias felt the weight of it settle over him like a shroud. This was bigger than one corrupt officer. This was a machine of injustice that had been running unchecked. If I help you, Murphy whispered, my career is over. If you don't help, a girl dies. Which matters more? The silence stretched. Murphy looked at Aida, at Hastian, at Tobias, at the choice laid out before him as clear as daylight. I need to make rounds, he said finally. Check the other cells. Takes about 10 minutes. I usually have coffee while I do it. Sometimes I get distracted. Sometimes I forget to lock doors properly. He met Tobias's eyes. 10 minutes. That's all I can give you. That's all we need. Murphy walked out. His footsteps faded. The sound of a door opening, closing. Tobias stood, tested the cell door, unlocked. Murphy had made his choice. Can you walk? Tobias asked Aida. She stood, swayed, steadied herself. I can run if I have to. You'll have to. Hasten, you should go. This won't touch you. The old Apache shook his head. I am already involved, and I know the trails they do not. You will need me. Tobias did not argue. Time was running. They moved quickly through the cell block, out the back door into the Arizona night. The temperature had dropped to maybe 80 degrees, felt almost cold after the day's heat. Tobias's horse was tied where he'd left it. A big Appaloosa mare, 15 hands high, strong enough to carry 2 people if needed. My cabin is 40 miles northeast, Tobias said quietly, in the White Mountains. We can reach it by tomorrow night if we push. They will track us, Aida said. Let them treat me. And then, from inside the fort, the sound they'd been dreading. A bell, loud and insistent. The alarm. Someone had discovered the empty cell. Brenner's voice, raised in fury, echoed across the compound. Prisoner escape! All hands, find them! Tobias swung into the saddle, reached down. Haston helped boost Aida up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, still weak but holding on. Where to? Haston asked. You know Mogollon Rim? I know it. Meet us at the Old Pine 3 miles north of the Rim Trail, 2 days from now. Bring the brother if you can. Haston nodded, melted into the shadows. Tobias spurred his horse. They shot forward into the darkness. Behind them, torches were being lit. Men shouting. Dogs barking. The machinery of pursuit grinding into motion. But Tobias had 11 years of knowing every trail, every canyon, every hidden path in this country. And he had something he hadn't had in a long time. A reason to live. A reason to fight. He'd failed Silver Dove. Failed Emma. Failed everyone he'd ever cared about by not being there when it mattered. He would not fail again. The horse galloped into the night. Aida held on tight. And behind them, Fort Prescott erupted into organized chaos. The hunt had begun. The desert night swallowed them whole. Tobias pushed the Appaloosa hard for the first hour. Not running flat out, that would kill the horse. But steady and fast, eating up ground, putting distance between them and the fort. The moon was a thin crescent, barely enough light to see by. But Tobias knew these lands, had ridden them for 8 years as an army scout, had lived in them for 11 more as a hermit. Every rock, every wash, every hidden trail. Behind them, torches flickered in the distance, a line of lights spreading out from Fort Prescott like angry fireflies. Voss had sent out search parties, probably 20 men, maybe more. They'd have dogs, trackers, Apache scouts who knew the land as well as Tobias did. But they didn't have his desperation. Aida's grip around his waist had loosened, not from choice, from exhaustion, her body leaning heavily against his back, the heat of her fever burning through both their clothes. Stay with me, Tobias said quietly. Just a few more miles. She didn't answer, might not have heard, might have been too far gone to care. At 2 miles out, Tobias veered sharply north, left the main trail, took them into a maze of arroyos and dry washes where horses could pass but barely, where trackers would have to slow down, where a man who knew what he was doing could lose a small army. He rode them into a shallow creek. Not much water, 6 inches deep at most, but enough. Followed it upstream for a mile. The water would scatter their scent. Confused by time, at a place where the rocks came close on both sides, he guided the horse up onto a granite shelf, smooth stone that wouldn't hold tracks, followed it for half a mile, then dropped back down into a different canyon entirely. Old Apache trick, one of many he'd learned from Silver Dove. By 3 in the morning, the torches behind them had scattered, some going east, some south, none following the path he'd taken. Good, he'd bought them maybe 3 hours, maybe 4. He found a small cave hidden behind a stand of scrub oak, not deep, maybe 20 feet, but the entrance was narrow and concealed. You could ride past it 100 times and never see it. He dismounted, his legs almost buckled. 48 years old, and he'd just ridden hard for 5 hours. His body reminded him of every one of those years. Aida slid off the horse and collapsed. Just went down like a puppet with cut strings. Tobias caught her before she hit the ground. Easy, I got you. He carried her into the cave, laid her on the sandy floor. Her skin was fire hot, fever climbing, the sun exposure and dehydration taking their toll. Water first. He had a canteen, made her drink. Small sips, slow. Her body was so deprived it might reject too much too fast. Then he soaked a bandana and laid it across her forehead, another across the back of her neck. Old field medicine. Cool the blood as it flows to the brain. Bring down the fever slowly. She was semi-conscious, eyes fluttering, lips moving but no sound coming out. Tobias built a small fire. Very small, just enough to boil water in his tin cup. He had dried yarrow in his saddlebag, a plant the Apache used for fevers, for infections, for a dozen different ailments. Silver Dove had taught him, Strange how the dead kept teaching long after they were gone. He made a tea from the yarrow. Strong, bitter. Got Aida to drink half a cup. She fought him at first, unconscious instinct against the terrible taste. But he was patient, persistent, and eventually she swallowed it down. Then there was nothing to do but wait and hope, and listen for the sound of pursuit that might come at any moment. Tobias sat with his back against the cave wall, his Springfield rifle across his lap, 44 caliber, single shot, accurate to 500 yards in the right hands. He had the right hands. He'd killed 17 men with this rifle. During the war, during the Indian campaigns, 17 men whose faces he still saw sometimes when he closed his eyes. 17 ghosts who kept Silver Dove and Emma company in his dreams. He didn't want to add more, but he would if he had to. The hours crawled past. 4 in the morning. The sky outside the cave beginning to lighten from black to deep blue. Dawn coming, and with it, the sounds of men and horses moving through the desert. Distant. Maybe a mile away. Maybe less. Hard to tell how sound carried in this country. Tobias moved to the cave entrance, peered out carefully. There, to the south, 4 riders moving slow, searching. One of them had a dog on a lead, a big bloodhound, nose to the ground. They were 300 yards away, moving roughly parallel to the cave. Not directly toward it, but not away either. Tobias calculated. If they kept that course, they'd pass within 100 yards, close enough that the dog might catch scent, close enough that sharp eyes might spot the cave entrance, close enough for trouble. He slipped back inside, checked Aida, still unconscious but breathing easier, the yarrow tea working, the fever breaking. He couldn't move her. Not yet. Moving her now would kill her as surely as Voss's bullet would. So he waited, rifle ready, 13 rounds in his cartridge belt, 1 already loaded, 14 shots total against 4 men. Bad odds, but not impossible. The sounds grew closer. Horses snorting, men's voices, low conversation punctuated by the dog's occasional whine. 200 yards. Tobias controlled his breathing, slow, steady, the way you do before a long shot. Get your heart rate down, get your hands steady. 150 yards. He could see them clearly now through the cave entrance. 4 soldiers, Sergeant Brenner leading them. The man who'd killed Aida's father, who'd smiled while she hung in the sun, who wanted nothing more than to finish what he'd started. The bloodhound suddenly stopped, lifted its head, tested the air. Brenner reined in. What is it? Boy, you got something? The dog pulled toward the cave. Not hard, not certain, but interested, curious. Brenner's eyes swept the landscape, looking for anything unusual, anything out of place. Tobias froze. Didn't move, didn't breathe. Sometimes the eye catches motion more than shape. Stay still enough, and you become part of the rock. The dog whined again, pulled harder. One of the other soldiers spoke up. Maybe just a coyote den, Sarge. Maybe. Brenner didn't sound convinced. Check it out. You and Mills. Rest of us will keep searching south. 2 soldiers dismounted, started walking toward the cave, rifles in hand, alert, professional. Tobias weighed his options. He could shoot both men, easy shots at this range. But then Brenner and the 4th soldier would hear, would know exactly where he was, would bring back the whole search party. Or he could wait, hope they looked inside the cave, saw nothing in the darkness, and moved on. 3rd option. He could try to talk his way out. Bad option, but maybe the only one that didn't end in blood. He set the rifle down, quietly, stood up, raised his hands, stepped into the cave entrance where they could see him. Morning, boys, he called out, voice calm, friendly even. Hell of a time to be out for a walk. Both soldiers spun toward him, rifles coming up, but they didn't fire. Didn't have a target worth shooting yet. Tobias Marchant, one of them said, younger, maybe 25. You're under arrest for aiding a prisoner escape. That's so? Tobias kept his hands up, kept his voice easy. Here's the thing, I'm just camping, minding my business. Ain't seen any prisoners, ain't aided anybody. Brenner rode up, looked at Tobias with cold satisfaction. Well, well, the legendary scout. Thought you were smarter than this, Grizz? Smart enough to stay out of other people's business usually. Not yesterday you weren't. Where's the girl? What girl? Brenner smiled. It was not a nice smile. You know, I could just shoot you right now. Say you resisted, say you went for a weapon. Who'd question it? Your conscience, if you have one. I sleep just fine. Brenner dismounted, started walking toward the cave entrance. The bloodhound at his heels suddenly very interested. 20 feet away. 15. The dog's entire body went rigid. Pointed toward the cave like an arrow. Started barking. High and urgent. Brenner's hand went to his pistol. She's in there. Mills, cover me. Jackson, ride back and get the others. One soldier galloped off. The other two advanced on the cave. Tobias didn't move. Still had his hands up. Still looked calm. But his mind was racing, calculating, planning. Last chance, Brenner said. Step aside. Can't do that. Then you'll die here. We all die somewhere. Brenner drew his pistol, aimed it at Tobias's chest. Your funeral. And that's when Aita screamed. Not a scream of fear, a scream of rage, pure and primal and full of 5 years of bottled-up fury. She came out of the darkness behind Tobias like a ghost, still weak, still feverish, but moving with the desperate strength of someone who had nothing left to lose. In her hand was Tobias's knife, 10 inches of sharpened steel. She'd taken it from his belt while he stood in the entrance. She didn't go for Brenner. Went for the soldier named Mills, the one closest, the one not expecting an attack from a woman who should barely be able to stand. The knife caught him in the shoulder. Deep, he screamed and went down. Brenner spun toward her, finger on the trigger. Tobias moved. 48 years old, body worn from hard living, but muscle memory doesn't forget, doesn't fade. He trained for situations like this when he was 20, drilled until it was instinct. He covered the distance to Brenner in 3 steps, hit him low and hard, shoulder to midsection. Perfect tackle, drove him backward off his feet. The pistol went off, the bullet went wild, punched a hole in the sky somewhere over the desert. They hit the ground together, rolled, grappling. Brenner was younger, stronger, meaner. But Tobias had fought grizzly bears, had survived winters that killed grown men, had 11 years of chopping wood and hauling water and living hard. He got his hands on Brenner's wrist, slammed it against a rock once, twice. The pistol fell free. Brenner brought a knee up, caught Tobias in the ribs. Pain exploded through his chest, might have cracked something. He rolled off. Gasping, Brenner scrambled for the pistol. Aita got there first. She picked it up with both hands, pointed it at Brenner with the unsteady grip of someone who'd never held a gun before. But her eyes were steady, hard as flint. Move and I will kill you, she said, her voice a whisper, but Brenner heard, froze. Because in her eyes he saw his own death, saw the daughter of the chief he'd murdered, saw 5 years of grief and rage and pain and all focused down into this one moment, and he believed her. Tobias got to his feet, ribs screaming, moved to Aita's side, gently took the pistol from her shaking hands. He killed my father, she whispered. I know. I want him dead. I know. Mills was still down, bleeding from the shoulder, not fatal but serious. The other soldier, the one who'd ridden for help, was probably 5 minutes away with reinforcements. Time was gone. The mathematics had changed. Now it was just survival. Tobias looked at Brenner, at the man who'd tortured Aita in the sun, who'd killed her father, who'd come here to finish the job. Part of him wanted to let Aita pull the trigger, wanted justice, wanted revenge. But revenge was a poison. He'd learned that lesson the hard way over 11 years in the mountains. Get on your horse, Tobias said to Brenner. Ride back to Voss. Tell him he's not getting her. Tell him the truth is coming out whether he likes it or not. Tell him to leave us alone. Brenner laughed, actually laughed. You're dead. You know that? Both of you. Voss won't stop. Can't stop. Too much at stake. Then he'll have to catch us first. Brenner stood slowly, back toward his horse, his eyes never leaving them. This ain't over, mountain man. I know. Brenner mounted, looked down at Mills bleeding in the dirt. For a moment it seemed like he might try to help. Then he just turned his horse and rode away. Left his wounded man behind. Left everything behind except his own skin. That told Tobias everything he needed to know about Sergeant Colt Brenner. Mills groaned, conscious, in pain, young eyes looking up at Tobias with fear. Am I dying? Tobias knelt beside him, examined the wound. No, missed anything important. You'll live. He tore a strip from Mill's own shirt, packed it into the wound, tied it tight. Field dressing. Not pretty, but it would hold until help arrived. Why? Mills asked. Why help me? I was trying to capture you. Because you're just following orders. And I don't kill boys for doing what they're told. He stood, looked at Aida. She was swaying on her feet, the adrenaline fading, the fever and exhaustion rushing back in. Can you ride? She nodded. Barely. There was no choice. They had to move. Now. The other soldiers would be here in minutes. Tobias got them both on the horse. Aida behind him again, holding on with the last of her strength. He took one last look at Mills lying in the dirt. There's water in the cave, food in my saddlebag. Tell Voss. He paused, thought about what to say. Tell him I've got people who'll listen, people who matter. Tell him it's over. He didn't wait for an answer, just spurred the horse and rode. North, toward the White Mountains, toward the reservation where Aida's brother held the evidence that could destroy Colonel Voss, toward whatever came next. Behind them, the sound of hoofbeats, multiple horses, the search party converging. But Tobias had a head start now. 5 minutes, maybe 10. In this country, 10 minutes could be the difference between life and death. The sun rose hot and red over the Arizona desert, and Tobias Marchant rode into it with an Apache woman at his back and the weight of truth on his shoulders. The war had begun. Chapter 5. The Reservation. They rode for 6 hours. Tobias pushed them hard, no choice. Every minute they stayed in the open was a minute Voss's men could close the gap. Find them. Kill them. The land changed as they rode north. Less desert, more scrub pine. The air growing thinner, cooler. The mountains rising in the distance like promises of sanctuary. Aida faded in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she held on tight. Sometimes her grip went slack, and Tobias had to reach back and steady her. Keep her from falling. He talked to her, kept up a steady stream of quiet words. Didn't matter what he said, just the sound of a voice. Something to anchor her to the world of the living. We're almost there. Just a few more miles. You're doing good. Real good. Stronger than most men I know. Just hold on a little longer. Around noon, they crested a ridge and saw it. The reservation. It spread out in the valley below like a wound on the earth. 30 acres of dust and poverty. Canvas tents and crude shelters built from scrap wood and adobe. Maybe 200 Apache living in conditions that would shame a prison. This was what the government called progress. What they called civilization. Take a proud people and cram them into a space barely big enough for their bodies. Take away their land, their freedom, their way of life. Give them flour and beef and call it generosity. Tobias had seen reservations before, had even escorted Apache families to them during his time as a scout. The memory sat in his gut like spoiled meat. Which shelter? He asked Aida. She lifted her head with effort, pointed with one trembling hand. North edge, blue cloth over the entrance. He rode them down the ridge. Slowly now, no need to spook the people who lived here, no need to cause panic. Eyes watched them from every shelter, suspicious, fearful. A white man riding in usually meant trouble, even a white man who came in peace. Children scattered as they approached, running to hide behind their mothers. Old men stood with crossed arms and hard faces, ready to fight if fighting was called for, ready to die protecting what little they had left. Tobias stopped the horse 30 yards from the shelter Aida had indicated, raised his voice, spoke in Apache. Not perfect, but clear enough. I bring Aida, daughter of Nentaje. She is hurt. She needs help. I am friend. No one moved. Tobias tried again. My name is Tobias Marchant. Some call me Grizz. 22 winters ago, I saved a boy from a bear. The son of Hastian. He knows me. He will speak for me. That got a reaction. An older woman emerged from one of the shelters. Thin, gray-haired, her face carved with lines of suffering and strength. She looked at Aida. Recognition dawned. Bring her here, she said in English. Accent thick but understandable. Tobias dismounted, helped Aida down. She could barely walk. He ended up carrying her. The old woman led them into the shelter. Inside was sparse. A blanket on the dirt floor, a small fire pit, a few possessions hung from the canvas walls. That was all. That was everything. He laid Aida on the blanket. She was burning up again. The morning's exertion had pushed her body past its limits. The old woman knelt beside her, checked her pulse, her breathing, pulled back her eyelids and looked at her pupils, nodded once. She will live. The fever is bad, but not death bad. I will care for her. Her brother, Tobias said. Kitchi, we need him. The woman's eyes narrowed. Why? Because she has something hidden, something important. Only he knows where. The woman studied Tobias for a long moment, reading him, judging, deciding if he could be trusted. Finally, she stood, went to the shelter entrance, called out in Apache, sharp, commanding. A boy appeared, maybe 13, skinny as a rail, big eyes, scared eyes, but also fierce eyes. He'd inherited that from his father. He saw Aida lying on the blanket and something broke in his face. He rushed to her side, dropped to his knees. Sister! Aida's eyes fluttered open, focused on him. A smile, small, weak, but real. Kitchi, I'm all right. They said you were dead. They said the soldiers hung you and you died. Almost, but this man saved me. She looked at Tobias. This is Tobias. He is friend. Kitchi looked up at Tobias. The boy was trying to be brave, trying to be strong, but his eyes were wet with tears he refused to let fall. Thank you, he whispered. Tobias nodded. She needs rest, but first we need what she hid. The book, the evidence, can you get it? Understanding dawned in Kitchi's eyes. The ledger. Yes, I know where it is. How far? Not far, half a mile, near the old oak tree where our parents are buried. Show me. They left Aida in the care of the old woman, stepped outside. The sun was directly overhead now, hot but not murderous, maybe 95 degrees. Kitchi led. Tobias followed. They walked through the reservation, past shelters where families lived in conditions no human should endure, past children with distended bellies and empty eyes, past men who'd been warriors once and were now just survivors. This was what America did to the people who were here first. This was civilization. At the northern edge of the reservation was a single oak tree, old, maybe 200 years. Its branches spread wide, providing the only real shade for 100 yards in any direction. At its base were two cairns, piles of stones marking graves, small white stones carefully arranged. Someone tended them, kept them clean. Kitchi did, Tobias realized. The boy came here every day, talked to his parents, told them about his life, about his sister, about surviving in a world that wanted them erased. Here, Kitchi said. He went to the larger cairn, father's grave, removed several stones, then started digging in the hard earth with his bare hands. Tobias knelt beside him, used his knife. Together they dug down maybe 2 feet. The boy's hands hit something solid, a clay pot, sealed with wax. He pulled it out, broke the seal. Inside was a leather-bound book, water-stained, worn, but intact. Tobias took it, opened it, pages covered in neat handwriting, dates, names, numbers, transactions, every illegal sale of weapons Colonel Voss had made over the past 3 years. 300 Winchester rifles sold to Apache raiders, knowing they'd be used to attack settlements, knowing it would justify more military action, knowing it would mean more land seized, more contracts awarded, more money flowing into Voss's pockets. 150 Colt pistols sold to land speculators, men who used them to intimidate Apache families, force them to sign away their rights, leave their lands, ammunition, explosives, even artillery pieces, all documented, all signed, all proof. This is it, Tobias said quietly. This is what Voss killed for. This is why he wants Aida dead. What do we do with it? Kitchi asked. We take it to someone who can use it, someone Voss can't touch. Who, Tobias thought. He'd been a scout, had worked with dozens of officers. Most were corrupt, most were complicit, but there were a few, a very few. who actually believed in justice. Fort Apache, he said. Captain Whitmore. He's new, transferred in 6 months ago. I heard he was trying to reform how things were done, actually treating the Apache fairly. If anyone will listen, it's him. Fort Apache is 40 miles from here. I know. The soldiers will be looking for you, for my sister. I know that too. Then it is a very dangerous journey. Tobias looked at the boy, really looked at him. 13 years old, alone except for a sister who might not survive. Living in poverty, living with the knowledge that his father was murdered. His mother died of grief. That the world was cruel and unjust and didn't care about people like him. And still there was hope in his eyes. Still there was a fight. Your sister is very brave, Tobias said. She learned from our father. And you're brave too, taking care of her, keeping this safe. Kitchi shrugged, trying to be casual, trying not to show how much the words meant. Someone has to. They replaced the stones on the cairn, made it look undisturbed, then walked back to the shelter. Inside, Aida was sleeping. The old woman had given her something. Some herb or root that brought deep rest. Her breathing was steady. The fever seemed lower. She will sleep until evening, the old woman said. Maybe longer. Her body needs time. We don't have time, Tobias said. Soldiers will come here looking for her. Then you must leave. Now I will tell them she was here but left. Buy you time. They'll punish you. The woman smiled. It was a hard smile, one that had seen too much suffering to fear more. They cannot hurt me worse than they already have. My husband is dead. My children are scattered. I have nothing left to lose. Tobias understood that feeling, had lived with it for 11 years. Thank you, he said. Thank you for saving her. The daughter of Nantaje should not die for doing what is right. Tobias looked at Aida sleeping, looked at Kitchi standing beside her, looked at the ledger in his hands. The situation was clear. They had evidence. They had a destination. They had maybe 12 hours before Voss's men arrived. But Aida couldn't travel. Not yet. Not for hours. I'll go, he said. Take the ledger to Fort Apache. Get help. Come back with soldiers who can protect the reservation. No. The word was quiet but firm. Aida's eyes were open. We go together. You can't ride, not yet. Then I will walk. I will crawl if I have to, but we go together. There was steel in her voice. The same steel that had kept her alive hanging in the sun. The same steel that had let her stab a soldier twice her size. Tobias wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was being stubborn and stupid and reckless. But he understood, because if their positions were reversed, he'd have said the same thing. Rest until dark, he said finally. We leave at midnight, ride through the night, reach Fort Apache by dawn. And if the soldiers come before then we fight. Simple, direct, no illusions. Aida nodded, closed her eyes again. Wake me when it is time. Chapter 6, The Night Ride. They didn't make it to midnight. The soldiers arrived at sunset. Tobias heard them coming, 20 horses moving fast. He was outside watching the eastern approach, and he saw the dust cloud rising in the orange light of the dying sun. He ran back to the shelter. They're here. Now. Aida was already on her feet, still weak but functioning. The old woman had made her drink something, some bitter tea that brought strength at the cost of pain later. Aida's eyes were bright, too bright, fever bright, but alert. Can you ride? Tobias asked. Yes. Can you shoot? She held up her father's old rifle. The old woman had retrieved it from wherever it was hidden. I can shoot. Kitchi appeared with Tobias's horse, already saddled, already ready. The boy was learning fast. I'm coming too, Kitchi said. No, Aida and Tobias said simultaneously. You need me. I know trails you don't, paths the soldiers won't find. Tobias looked at Aida. She looked back, some wordless communication passing between them. She nodded once. You stay behind me, Tobias said to the boy. You do what I say when I say it. No arguments, no hesitation. Understand? Yes. Good. Mount up. They rode out the back of the reservation, away from the approaching soldiers. Kitchi led them along a narrow path that wound between scrub pine and juniper, barely wide enough for a horse, but it ran north, toward the mountains, toward Fort Apache, behind them shouting, orders being barked, the sounds of the reservation being searched. They had 5 minutes, maybe 10, before the soldiers realized their quarry had fled, before the pursuit began in earnest. Tobias pushed them hard, not as hard as before. Aida couldn't take that, but steady, fast, eating up ground. The sun set, darkness fell. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in the span of an hour. Tobias was grateful for his bearskin coat now. Aida shivered behind him but didn't complain. They rode through the night, Kitchi navigating by starlight and instinct, taking them through country only Apache knew, country the soldiers would struggle to follow. At midnight, they stopped to rest the horse, to give Ayita water, to let Kichi's young legs stretch. They were somewhere in the high country now, 7,000 feet above sea level, pine forest all around them, the air thin and cold and clean. How much further? Tobias asked. 20 miles, Kichi said. Maybe less. We are making good time. 20 miles. 4 hours of riding. They could make it. They could actually make it. And that's when the arrow hit the tree beside Tobias's head. Didn't hit him, not meant to. A warning shot, but close enough that he felt the wind of its passage. Don't move, a voice said in Apache. Male, young, coming from the darkness to their left. Tobias froze, hands away from his rifle, showing he wasn't a threat. A figure emerged from the shadows. Apache, maybe 28 years old, tall, lean, wearing a mix of traditional clothing and army-issue pants. A contradiction walking, he had a bow in his hands. Another arrow already knocked, pointed at Tobias's chest. Who are you? The man demanded. Aida spoke before Tobias could. Naalnish? Is that you? The bow lowered slightly. Aida? Yes. The bow lowered completely. The man stepped closer, disbelief on his face. They said you were dead, said you were hung for treason. Almost. This man saved me. This is Tobias. He is friend. Naalnish looked at Tobias, really looked at him, reading him, judging. You are the one they call Grizz, the mountain man. I am. I have heard stories. You saved Hastian's son many years ago. I did. Naalnish nodded slowly, came to some internal decision. I am scout for Fort Apache, Captain Whitmore's scout. I was tracking the soldiers from Fort Prescott, Voss's men. They are hunting you. We know. They are close. Maybe 1 hour behind you. Maybe less. Tobias's jaw tightened. We're heading to Fort Apache. We have evidence, proof of Voss's crimes. Captain Whitmore will want to see it. Naalnish's eyes widened. Evidence? What kind? Tobias showed him the ledger. Even in the darkness, even by moonlight, the implications were clear. Naalnish whistled softly. This is big, very big. Whitmore will definitely want to see this, but Voss will kill everyone to keep it hidden. I know. Then we must hurry. Follow me. I know a faster way. He led them through the forest at a pace that terrified Tobias. Too fast, too reckless. One wrong step and a horse could break a leg. One bad turn and they'd plunge off a cliff they couldn't see. But Naalnish knew these trails, knew every root and rock. And more importantly, he was right. They were moving faster, cutting time, gaining distance. They rode for 2 more hours, the eastern sky beginning to lighten. Not sunrise yet, but close. That gray pre-dawn when the world holds its breath between night and day. And then they saw it. Fort Apache. It sat on a low hill overlooking a valley, smaller than Fort Prescott. Maybe 30 buildings, a wooden palisade wall, 2 guard towers, the American flag hanging limp in the still morning air. We made it, Kitchi whispered. Not yet, Tobias said, not until we're inside. They approached the main gate. 2 sentries stood watch. Both looked surprised to see riders coming in so early. Looked more surprised to see an Apache scout, a mountain man, an Apache woman, and an Apache boy. Halt! State your business. Naalnish spoke up. I am Naalnish, scout for Captain Whitmore. These people have urgent business with the captain. Open the gate. At this hour? Now, soldier, captain's orders. I am authorized to bring in anyone with intelligence regarding enemy movements. The sentry hesitated, then nodded, called to his partner. The gate swung open. They rode through, into the fort. into relative safety. Tobias let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. They'd made it, against all odds, against pursuit and fever and exhaustion and impossible odds. They'd made it. Nalnish led them directly to the captain's quarters. Dismounted, pounded on the door. "Captain Whitmore! Emergency! You need to hear this!" A minute passed. Then the door opened. A man stood there, maybe 39 years old, clean-shaven, sharp eyes, wearing pants and an undershirt. He'd clearly just woken up, but was already alert. "Naalnish, what's the emergency?" "Sir, this is Tobias Marchant, scout, and Ayita, daughter of Chief Nantaye. They have evidence, proof of illegal weapon sales. Murder, conspiracy. They're being hunted by Colonel Voss's men." Whitmore's eyes sharpened. "Come inside, all of you." They filed into the small office. Whitmore lit a lamp. The golden light pushed back the darkness. Tobias laid the ledger on Whitmore's desk. 3 years of weapon sales, all documented, all signed by Colonel Harlan Voss. He's been arming both sides, creating conflict, profiting from it. And when a federal inspector got too close, Voss killed him. Whitmore opened the ledger, read. His face grew darker with each page. "My God," he whispered. "Aida witnessed the murder," Tobias continued. "She stole this as evidence. Voss hung her in the sun to torture a confession. To find out where she'd hidden it, I helped her escape. Now he wants us both dead." Whitmore looked up. "Do you know how serious this is? Accusing a colonel of murder and treason?" "I know exactly how serious. That's why we're here. You're the only officer in the territory I thought might listen, might care about truth more than rank." Whitmore studied Tobias for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, I believe you. But belief isn't enough. We need more proof. We need the body." "Where Mist Voss bury the inspector?" "Devil's Throat Canyon," Aida said, her voice weak but clear. "Under the twisted juniper. Brenner said so. That's 20 miles west. Bad country." Whitmore thought, made his decision. "I'll send a team, recover the body. That plus this ledger should be enough to bring formal charges." "Voss won't let it happen," Tobias said. "He'll come here. Try to stop it." "Let him try. This is my fort, my jurisdiction. He has no authority here." As if summoned by the words, a commotion arose outside. Shouting, the sound of many horses. Everyone froze. A soldier burst through the door. "Captain, Colonel Voss is at the gate. He's demanding entry. Says he's in pursuit of escaped prisoners." Whitmore's jaw set. "How many men?" 50, sir, maybe more. And they're armed." "Of course they are," Whitmore stood. "Tell them I'll meet them at the gate. Tell them they are not authorized to enter without my express permission." The soldiers saluted and ran. Whitmore looked at Tobias and Aida. "Stay here. Don't come out, no matter what you hear." "Captain," Tobias started, "that's an order. This is politics now. Military politics. Let me handle it." He grabbed his jacket, strapped on his sidearm, walked out, leaving Tobias and Aida and Kitchi and Nalnish alone in the lamplit office. Outside, voices raised in anger, Voss demanding, Whitmore refusing. The sound of two military commanders arguing jurisdiction and authority and the letter of the law. And Tobias knew with absolute certainty that this was far from over. The storm was just beginning. The argument at the gate lasted 20 minutes. Tobias stood at the window of Whitmore's office, watching through the early morning light. Couldn't hear the words, but could read the body language. Voss sitting tall on his white horse. Uniform perfect, despite the night ride. Voice raised, gesturing, demanding. Whitmore standing firm at the gate, arms crossed, not backing down, not giving an inch. Behind Voss, 50 men, soldiers mostly, but also hired guns, men with dead eyes and quick hands, men who killed for money and slept fine afterward. "He's going to attack," Aida said quietly. She stood beside Tobias, still weak but standing on her own, refusing to show weakness even though her legs trembled. "Maybe, maybe not. Attacking a U.S. fort is a serious thing, even for Voss. He has no choice. If that ledger reaches Washington, he hangs. You gave him only one option. Kill everyone who knows." She was right. Tobias knew it. Voss was desperate, and desperate men did desperate things. At the gate, the argument ended. Voss wheeled his horse around, rode back to his men, Whitmore stayed at the gate, watching, waiting. For a moment, nothing happened. The two forces simply stared at each other across 100 yards of empty ground. Then Voss raised his hand, gave a signal. His men scattered, not retreating, deploying, taking positions around the fort, surrounding it. He's not leaving, Nalnish observed. He's settling in, preparing for a siege. Whitmore returned to his office. His face was grim. He's lost his mind, the captain said without preamble. He's actually threatening to take this fort by force. Says you're escaped prisoners. Says I'm harboring criminals. Says he has authority under military law to retrieve you by any means necessary. And you said? I told him to go to hell. Told him this is my command, my jurisdiction, and that he can take his authority and shove it where the sun don't shine. Whitmore allowed himself a small smile. May have phrased it more diplomatically, but that was the gist. How many men do you have? Tobias asked. 45 soldiers, 30 Apache scouts and warriors who will work with us. Total of 75 fighting men. He has 50, but they're mercenaries, professional killers. I know. Whitmore moved to his desk, started pulling out maps, papers. I've sent riders to Fort Whipple. They're 60 miles east. Should have reinforcements here by tomorrow afternoon. We just need to hold until then. You really think Voss will attack a U.S. fort? Think Voss is looking at a noose, at losing everything, his career, his reputation, his life. Men facing that don't think straight. They lash out. As if to prove the point, a rifle shot cracked through the morning air. Then another, then a dozen more, the sound of bullets hitting the wooden palisade wall. Here we go, Whitmore said quietly. He raised his voice. All hands! Battle stations! This is not a drill! The fort erupted into organized chaos, soldiers running to positions, Apache scouts taking spots on the walls, weapons being distributed, ammunition being moved. Tobias grabbed his Springfield, checked the load, 14 rounds left in his cartridge belt. Not enough for a prolonged fight, but it would have to do. Where do you want me? He asked Whitmore. North Tower. Best vantage point, best field of fire. You're the best shot I've got. Aida and Kitchi? Medical tent. They'll be safe there. Protected. Aida started to object. Tobias silenced her with a look. You can barely stand. Kitchi is 13. This isn't your fight anymore. Let us handle it. It has always been my fight. And you've fought enough. You got us here. You kept the evidence safe. You did your part. Now rest. Heal. Let other people carry the weight for a while. Something in his voice reached her. She nodded slowly. Let Nalnish lead her and Kitchi toward the medical tent. Tobias watched them go, then turned and ran for the North Tower. The shooting intensified. Not aimed fire yet, just harassment, keeping heads down, testing defenses. Tobias climbed the ladder to the tower platform. 20 feet up, good view of the surrounding terrain. He could see Voss's men taking positions, using rocks and trees for cover, setting up for a real assault. A soldier was already up there. Young, maybe 22. Name tag said Harrison. He looked scared but steady. Ever been in a real fight before? Tobias asked. No, sir, just training. Then stay low, pick your shots, don't waste ammunition, and remember that every man out there is someone's son, someone's brother. You shoot to stop them, not to punish them. Harrison nodded, gripped his rifle tighter. The sun rose fully now, morning light flooding across the valley. Beautiful day for terrible things. Tobias scanned the enemy positions, counted men, noted weapons, started doing the mathematics of war. 50 men attacking, 75 defending, advantage to defense with walls and elevation. But the attackers were professional, knew what they were doing, had done this before. It would be close. A bugle sounded, not from the fort, from Voss's position. The first wave came, 20 men rushed the south gate, running in a crouch, covering each other, professional, disciplined. The fort's defenders opened fire, the crash of rifles deafening. Men fell, 3, 4. The others kept coming. They hit the gate with Uthni battering ram, probably a log they'd cut that morning, swung it hard. The gate shuddered but held. From the North Tower, Tobias had a clear shot at the men holding the ram. 500 yards, wind negligible, target moving but predictable. He settled his breathing, aimed, squeezed the trigger. The Springfield roared. The kick slammed into his shoulder. Downrange, one of the men dropped the ram, fell. His friends dragged him back. Tobias reloaded, aimed again, fired. Another man down. The assault on the south gate faltered, broke. The attackers retreated, dragging their wounded with them. First wave repelled. Cost to the fort, 0 casualties. Cost to Voss, 6 men down, 2 dead. But it was just the beginning. The second wave hit the east wall. Different tactic. They brought ladders, tried to scale the wooden palisade. Apache scouts met them at the top. Hand-to-hand fighting. Brutal, desperate. Men grappling on a narrow walkway with a 20-foot drop on either side. Tobias couldn't shoot without hitting friendlies. All he could do was watch and pray. 3 attackers made it over the wall, got into the fort proper, and started causing chaos. But Whitmore was ready, had a reserve squad waiting. They converged on the attackers. Short, brutal fight. 2 attackers killed, 1 captured. Second wave repelled. Cost to the fort, 4 wounded. Cost to Voss, 8 men down, 3 dead. The attacks continued all morning, probing, testing, looking for weakness. Each wave a little different, a little smarter. Voss was learning, adapting. By noon, the score was Fort Apache defenders, 11 casualties total. Voss's forces, 23 casualties, 7 confirmed dead. But the defenders were running low on ammunition, running low on energy, running low on the adrenaline that keeps men fighting when their bodies want to quit. And Voss still had 30 men, still had resources, still had the desperate energy of a man with nothing to lose. Tobias took a water break. His shoulder ached from the rifle's recoil. He'd fired maybe 30 shots, hit with 20 of them. Not his best ratio, but acceptable, given the circumstances. Harrison sat beside him. The young soldier had held up well, hadn't panicked, hadn't broken. "You did good," Tobias said. "Thank you, sir. You too." They sat in companionable silence, drinking water, catching breath, waiting for the next attack. It came at 2 in the afternoon, but this time it was different. This time Voss committed everything. All 30 remaining men, hitting all 4 walls simultaneously. Ladders, ropes, the battering ram again. Everything at once. Overwhelming force applied to multiple points. The defenders spread thin, fighting everywhere. Desperate, determined. Men fell on both sides. The walkways slick with blood. The air thick with gunpowder smoke and screaming. Tobias fired until his rifle barrel glowed hot. Reloaded. Fired again. Men fell, but more kept coming. He was down to his last 3 rounds when he saw Voss himself climbing a ladder on the west wall. The colonel had finally committed personally, was leading from the front, pistol in one hand, sword in the other, climbing with the desperate strength of a man who'd decided to win or die trying. Whitmore saw him too, moved to intercept. They met at the top of the wall, crossed swords, 2 officers, 2 visions of what the military should be, fighting it out with steel and fury. Tobias couldn't get a shot. Too many friendlies in the way. All he could do was watch. The fight was brutal. Whitmore was younger, faster. But Voss had experience, had survived Gettysburg, had killed men in ways Whitmore had never imagined. They fought along the narrow walkway. Whitmore pressed hard, drove Voss back, was winning. And then Voss did something unexpected. Threw his sword at Whitmore's face. Just threw it like a spear. Whitmore dodged, had to. Threw off his balance for just a second. Voss shot him, point blank. In the chest, Whitmore fell. A roar went up from Voss's men. Their colonel had just killed the fort's commander. The tide was turning, but then something happened that Voss hadn't counted on. Nalnish appeared. The Apache scout had seen Whitmore fall, saw Voss standing over him, and something broke inside him. He'd spent his life trying to bridge 2 worlds, trying to serve both his people in the army, trying to believe that cooperation was possible, that peace was possible. And Voss had just killed the one officer who had actually treated him with respect, who had actually tried to make things better. Nihilnish screamed, a war cry that echoed across the battlefield. Pure rage, pure grief. He rushed Voss. No weapon, just bare hands and fury. They collided, went down in a tangle of limbs, rolled, grappling, fighting for Voss's pistol. The gun went off, once, twice. Both men went still. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed, waiting to see who would get up. Nihilnish rose slowly, blood on his side, but standing, alive. Voss didn't get up. The second shot had found its mark. Voss lay on the walkway, blood spreading beneath him, eyes staring at the Arizona sky, seeing nothing. Dead. The fight went out of his men immediately, without their leader, without their employer. They had no reason to keep fighting, no reason to die for a dead man's secrets. They threw down their weapons, raised their hands, surrendered, just like that. After hours of battle, after 26 men dead, after blood and fire and desperate fury, it was over. Sorry. Chapter 8. Justice. The cleanup took hours. Wounded men had to be treated. Dead men had to be identified, buried. Prisoners had to be secured and processed. The fort had to be put back together. Tobias worked through it all like a machine, helping carry wounded, digging graves, doing what needed doing. He found Aida in the medical tent. She was helping treat the wounded despite barely being able to stand herself, bandaging, applying pressure to bleeding wounds, offering water and comfort. Whitmore, she asked when she saw Tobias. Alive, shot in the chest, but the bullet missed his heart by inches. Surgeon thinks he'll make it. Tobias paused. He'll be recovering for months. Won't command again for at least a year, but he'll live. And Voss? Dead. She absorbed this, showed no emotion, just nodded once. Good, she said quietly. Kitchi appeared beside them. The boy had been helping too, fetching water, holding hands, being useful. Is it really over? He asked. The fighting is, Tobias said, but there's still work to do, still truth to tell, still justice to see done. That evening, as the sun set over Fort Apache, Tobias sat with Nihilnish. The Apache scout was bandaged but would survive. The bullet had gone through his side, painful but not fatal. You saved us, Tobias said. I saved myself, saved what I believe in. Whitmore was a good man. Voss killed him for trying to do right. Whitmore's still alive. I know, but Voss still tried, still killed many others. Someone had to stop him. They sat in silence, two men who'd fought in a battle neither had wanted, who'd survived when others hadn't. What happens now? Nihilnish asked. Now we wait for the reinforcements from Fort Whipple. When they get here, they'll take custody of the prisoners, take the ledger, take Voss's body, start a formal investigation. And us? We testify, we tell the truth, we let justice happen. The reinforcements arrived the next morning. 80 cavalry under Major William Custer, a distant relative of the more famous Custer, but with better sense and worse luck. He took one look at the scene, the damaged fort, the dead men, the prisoners, the ledger. Voss's body laid out in the chapel. Someone explained to me what in God's name happened here. Tobias explained. Every detail, from finding Aida hanging in the sun to the final battle, leaving nothing out. Custer listened, his face growing darker with each revelation. Colonel Harlan Voss, war hero, Medal of Honor recipient, pillar of the military community. He shook his head. And a murderer, a traitor, a monster. He was all those things, Tobias agreed. Human beings are complicated, can be heroes and monsters, sometimes simultaneously. Custer ordered a full investigation, sent teams to Devil's Throat Canyon. They came back 3 days later with bodies, 4 of them, badly decomposed but identifiable by their possessions. Federal Inspector Edward Mallory, Sheriff William Hawks, Captain Morris Green, and one unidentified civilian, all murdered, all buried in secret, all victims of Voss's scheme to profit from war, except Mallory wasn't dead. He walked into Fort Apache 6 days after the battle, barely alive, emaciated, infected wounds, burning with fever, but alive. The steel vest under his coat had saved him. The bullets had knocked him unconscious. Voss thought he was dead, dumped him in the canyon. But Mallory woke up, climbed out, survived on rainwater and lizards and sheer stubbornness. He'd been trying to reach Fort Apache for 3 weeks, walking, hiding from Voss's patrols, nearly dying a dozen times. But he made it, and his testimony, combined with the ledger, combined with the bodies, was enough, more than enough. The trial happened in Fort Whipple, military tribunal, 7 generals presiding. Took 2 weeks to hear all the evidence. Tobias testified, told everything he knew. Ayita testified, described witnessing the murder, described being tortured, described everything Voss had done. Mallory testified, his voice still weak, his body still recovering, but his mind sharp, his memory perfect. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. The verdict came quickly. Had Voss lived, he would have hanged. Since he was already dead, the tribunal settled for stripping him of all rank and honors, declaring him a traitor, confiscating his estate to compensate victims. It wasn't enough, could never be enough, but it was something. But 3 weeks after the verdict, letters began arriving, not just from Arizona, from New Mexico territory, from Colorado, from as far as Montana and Texas. Letters from Apache families, from Navajo communities, from Cheyenne reservations, all telling similar stories. Our chief disappeared after reporting corruption. The inspector who came never returned. Our land was taken after we refused bribes. My brother died in his cell. They said suicide. The Voss case had opened a floodgate. The publicity from the trial, the evidence made public, the testimony that couldn't be buried. It all combined to give voice to the voiceless. Dozens of other cases came to light. Other corrupt officers, other murders, other land theft schemes, some dating back 10 years or more. The War Department was forced to act. A commission was formed. Policies were rewritten. Officers were investigated. Some were court-martialed. A few hanged. The system didn't transform overnight. Evil that entrenched never dies easily. But cracks appeared in the wall. Light got in where before there was only darkness. And it all traced back to one moment, one decision. One man who chose to stop his horse on a hot Arizona day instead of riding past. Tobias didn't know about most of this yet, wouldn't know for months. But the ripples were already spreading outward, touching lives he'd never meet, in places he'd never see. After the trial, after the testimony, after the whole circus was over, Tobias found himself standing outside Fort Whipple, unsure what to do next. He'd spent 11 years alone, hiding from the world, hiding from himself. And in the space of 2 weeks, everything had changed. He'd saved a life, fought a battle, helped bring down a corrupt officer, done things that mattered. And he'd done them with Ayita, this strange, fierce Apache woman who'd refused to die, who'd refused to give up, who'd reminded him what it meant to fight for something bigger than yourself. She found him standing there, Kitchi beside her, both of them packed and ready to travel. "Where will you go?" Tobias asked. "Back to the reservation. Help rebuild. Help our people." Ayita looked at him, really looked at him. "You could come with us." "I'm not sure I'd be welcome. White man in an Apache camp." "You would be welcome. You saved me, saved Kitchi, helped bring justice. That matters. That counts for something." Tobias thought about his cabin in the White Mountains, cold and empty, 11 years of isolation waiting for him, and he thought about the alternative. Community, purpose, people who needed help, Ayita. "I'll come for a while," he said, "help rebuild. Then maybe we'll see." She smiled, small but real. "Then let us go home." They rode out together, 3 people on 2 horses, heading toward an uncertain future, but heading together. And for the first time in 11 years, Tobias Marchant didn't feel alone. Chapter 9, Rebuilding. The reservation had changed in their absence. Word of Voss's death and crimes had spread. The investigation had revealed not just his personal corruption, but systemic abuse throughout the territorial military system. New commanders were appointed, new policies implemented. The Apache were given better rations, better medical care, more autonomy. It wasn't paradise, wasn't justice, wasn't restitution for everything that had been taken, but it was better, and better mattered. Tobias threw himself into the work of rebuilding, used his carpentry skills to help construct new shelters, permanent structures instead of canvas tents, taught young Apache men how to preserve meat for winter, how to maintain rifles, how to negotiate with traders, shared everything he knew, everything Silver Dove had taught him. Aida worked as official translator for Fort Apache, rode there twice a month, helped negotiate agreements, helped her people navigate the complex bureaucracy of the government, and slowly, carefully, she and Tobias built something between them. Not romance, nothing so simple, but partnership, respect, understanding. Two damaged people helping each other heal. Kitchi thrived. The boy had seen terrible things, done terrible things for a 13-year-old, but he was resilient. Strong like his father before him, he learned to read and write from Aida, learned to hunt and track from Tobias, grew into a young man who could bridge two worlds. The seasons turned, summer to fall, fall to winter, winter to spring, and one evening, 18 months after the battle at Fort Apache, Tobias and Aida sat together watching the sunset over the White Mountains. "Do you ever think about going back?" she asked. "To your cabin? To being alone?" Tobias thought about it, really thought about it. Sometimes, he admitted, the quiet was easier, simpler, no complications, no responsibilities, no people to worry about. But easy isn't the same as good, and simple isn't the same as right. He looked at her. Silver Dove used to say that we're not meant to be alone, that we're pack animals, need each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Your wife was wise. She was. Silence for a while. Comfortable. Easy. "I want to stay," Tobias said finally. "Here. With you, with Kichi, with the community, if you'll have me." Aida took his hand, rough calloused fingers intertwining. "You already stayed. 18 months. That is not temporary." "I know, but I wanted to say it. Make it official." "Then it is official. You are one of us now, for as long as you want." They sat together as the sun sank below the mountains, as the sky turned from gold to orange to purple to black, as the stars emerged one by one. And Tobias thought about all the choices that had led him here. The choice to stop instead of riding past. The choice to help instead of looking away. The choice to fight instead of hiding. Every choice had cost him something. Safety, solitude, the comfortable numbness of isolation. But every choice had also given him something back. Purpose, connection, life. He thought about the girl hanging in the sun, about the desperate ride through the desert, about the battle at Fort Apache, about everything that had happened since that morning 2 years ago. And he knew with absolute certainty that if he had to do it all again, he would make the same choices. Every single one. Because some things matter more than safety, more than comfort, more than self-preservation. Sometimes you see someone suffering, and you stop, and you help. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that single choice changes everything. Not just for them, but for you too. So, epilogue. 15 years later, the old man's voice fades to silence. The story complete. The memories laid out like cards on a table. Outside the window, Arizona stretches vast and beautiful. The White Mountains in the distance. The reservation valley below. Neat houses now instead of canvas tents. A school, a clinic, gardens and livestock, and the organized chaos of a community that's thriving. The young woman sitting across from him sets down her pencil. She's been writing furiously for the past 3 hours, taking down every word, recording history. "That's an incredible story, Mr. Marchant." "It's just the truth. Nothing incredible about truth. It just is." "And Aida, where is she now?" The old man smiles, gestures out the window. A woman walks across the compound, maybe 53 years old, still beautiful, still fierce, teaching a group of children, showing them how to make traditional Apache baskets. Right there, still fighting, still teaching, still refusing to give up. "And you're still together?" 30 years now, not married, never saw the point, but together partners. What about Kitchi, Ayita's brother? Opened 6 schools across the territory, teaching Apache children to read and write, both English and Apache, building bridges. His father would be proud. The young woman closes her notebook. Why tell this story now, after all these years? Tobias is quiet for a long moment, looking out the window, looking at the life he built, the community he's part of, the people who depend on him and let him depend on them. Because people need to know that one choice matters, one moment, one decision to stop instead of riding past. The world tries to tell us we're powerless, that nothing we do matters, that we might as well look away. His voice gets stronger, more certain. But that's a lie. Every choice matters. Every action counts. I was 48 years old, broken, hiding, convinced my life was over. Then I saw a woman suffering, and I stopped, and everything changed. Changed for both of you. Changed for everyone. Voss's corruption was exposed. The whole system got reformed. Dozens of Apache communities got better treatment. Hundreds of lives improved. All because of one choice, one moment. The young woman nods, understands. So what do you want people to take away from this story? Tobias thinks, chooses his words carefully, because words matter. Stories matter. I want them to know that justice doesn't always come from courts and judges. Sometimes it comes from ordinary people refusing to look away, refusing to accept cruelty as normal, refusing to let injustice stand unchallenged. And I want them to know that it's never too late. I was 48, thought my life was over, but the most important years were still ahead of me, the most meaningful choices still unmade. And I want them to know that sometimes the people we save end up saving us too. I rescued Ayita from a rope, but really, she rescued me from 11 years of death disguised as living. He stands, slowly, 65 years old and feeling every year, but still strong, still here. That's the story, that's the truth. Do with it what you will. The young woman stands too, shakes his hand. Thank you, Mr. Marchant. This will make a wonderful article. Just tell it right, tell it true. Don't make me a hero. I'm just a man who made a choice. The hero is the woman out there, teaching children, building future, refusing to let her people be forgotten. The young woman leaves. Tobias watches her go, then walks outside. Ayita sees him, excuses herself from the children, walks over, takes his hand. How did it go? Good, I think. Hard to tell if I said what needed saying. You always say what needs saying. They walk together, through the community they helped build, past houses where families live in dignity, past the school where children learn, past the clinic where the sick get healed, past the monuments to all those who didn't survive, the names carved in stone, Chief Nantaji, the victims of Voss's crimes, the soldiers who died at Fort Apache. Good and bad remembered together. Because that's what truth requires, remembering it all, the beautiful and the terrible, the heroic and the shameful. At the edge of the community is a single tree, an oak, transplanted from where Ayita's parents were buried. Thriving now in this new soil, they sit beneath it, in the shade, watching the sun begin its descent toward the mountains. Do you have regrets? Ayita asks. Not for the first time, but the answer changes, evolves. About stopping that day? Never. About everything that came after? Sometimes war is terrible. People died, good people, on both sides, Vadimas. But would you change it? No, because the alternative was letting you die, letting Voss continue, letting injustice win. And I couldn't do that, wouldn't do that, even knowing the part. She leans against him, her head on his shoulder, a gesture of complete trust. I would have died that day, without you. And I would have died eventually in my cabin, alone without you. We saved each other. The children are playing nearby, Apache children and white children together, learning each other's games, each other's languages, building something new. That's the real victory, Tobias thinks. Not the battle, not the trial, not Voss's death. These children, this future. What do you think happens next? Ayita asks. for us, for the community. I don't know, I'm 65, you're 53. We're not young anymore, but we're not done either. There's still work to do, still bridge to build, still truth to tell. Always more work, always. That's the blessing and the curse. The work never ends. We just do what we can, for as long as we can, and hope it matters. The sun touches the mountain peaks, gold and orange and red, painting the sky in colors that have no names. And Tobias Marchant, mountain man, scout, hermit, fighter, teacher, partner, sits beneath an oak tree with the woman he saved and who saved him, watching another day end in the land they both love. The story is over, but the life continues. The work continues. The hope continues. And that, he thinks, is exactly how it should be. Some things end, some things endure. The trick is knowing which is which, and choosing every day to stop instead of riding past, to help instead of looking away, to fight instead of surrendering, to live instead of merely surviving. That's the choice. That's always been the choice. And it's never too late to make it. Never. The sun has set completely now. The Arizona sky transitions from purple to deep blue to black. Stars emerge one by one, the same stars that watched over this land long before forts and reservations, and will watch long after. In the distance, the reservation glows with warm light, not the harsh glare of military searchlights, not the cold illumination of judgment, just the gentle glow of lanterns and windows. Each light a home, each home a family, each family a small victory against the darkness. Tobias and Aida rise slowly. The joints protest, 65 and 53 years old, not young but not done either. They walk together toward those lights, past the school where Kitschy teaches, past the clinic that saves lives Voss would have let die, past gardens that grow food where once was only dust. Behind them, the transplanted oak tree stands guard, silent witness to past and future both. And if you look closely at its trunk, barely visible in the starlight, you'll see names carved with care. Nantaye, Desba, and below, added more recently, Tobias, Eyita, not married, not blood family, but family nonetheless, the way family should be. Chosen, built, earned through shared suffering and shared hope. The camera pulls back slowly, higher and higher. The two figures become small against the landscape, then smaller still, until they're just shadows moving toward light, until the whole reservation is just a cluster of glowing points in vast darkness. Until Arizona itself becomes just geography, and the story becomes just one moment in endless time. But that moment mattered. That choice mattered. And somewhere tonight, in another town, in another territory, another person stands at another crossroads, sees another injustice, faces another choice. Ride past or stop. The story doesn't end. It never really ends. It just waits for the next person brave enough to write the next chapter, to stop instead of riding past, to help instead of looking away, to choose justice over convenience, to choose life over isolation, to choose hope over despair. The choice is always there, waiting, always waiting.